The readings today speak to us of discipleship, what it means to be a disciple. And yet the second reading seems to speak more about immorality and how sometimes we can misuse our bodies toward the kingdom. I think the two intertwine very nicely, because many times we refuse to be disciples, or we are reluctant disciples, because we cannot rectify that with our sinful nature. We cannot see in ourselves the ability to be disciples when we're so bad. And as I think about this, I really do believe this. God sees the best in us. He really does. Now, He doesn't want to leave us there. He wants to draw us beyond our own expectations, but He does see the best in us. And I imagine sometimes if we saw the best in us too, that we'd be very powerful disciples. That we would take those good things instead of focusing on the bad and make more of the good and have them grow. And if they grow, well, then there's no time for the bad. And so we are all called toward this discipleship, that the Lord doesn't ask us to be successful. He asks us to be faithful. And so there are many ways that we can be disciples. So for instance, this whole week, Father Wayne was ministering to the people at the farm show every night. He was teaching them about the great gifts that God has given us, like things cooked in lard and things with butter spread over top of it. Maybe not every night, maybe 5 nights. The fact is, there are so many ways in which God can use us to be disciples. We simply have to be willing to do what we can, the best we can, with what we've been given. And we know whether we're doing that or not. Sometimes in confession, I will say to the person, you know yourself. So if you're telling me you're doing the best you can, you know whether you're doing the best you can or not. We know ourselves. And that's all the Lord's asking, for a fair shake. To take what He has entrusted to us, as good or as bad or as indifferent as it is, we think, and make it blossom. That's what He's asking of us. There's a story of this man who was a CEO of a company. And he was getting on in years, so he finally decided, well, it's time for someone to take over the company. But he didn't want to keep with tradition and give it to one of his sons. He decided his sons had never really been involved in the business. They were kind of sitting on their laurels waiting to inherit it. And so he went out to the employees one day, he gathered them all together, and he said, one of you standing here now, at this time next year, will be the CEO of the company. Now they couldn't believe it, because a lot of them were just laborers. He didn't even know if the CEO knew their name. But they were excited about this, and so they were wondering how he was going to choose. And so he took a bag, and in this bag there were seeds. And he gave to each employee a seed. And he said, now you take this seed home, you plant it, put it in whatever soil you want, cultivate it any way you choose, use whatever fertilizer is necessary, water it, you can even talk to it, I don't care. But at this time next year, bring whatever you have grown back to me. And from this I will choose the next executive of the company. So everyone took their seed and greedily ran home and planted it and cultivated it, did whatever they could. Well, there was this one guy, and his name was Chris. Chris was a very devoted employee. He was a very honest employee. But he wasn't a farmer by any means. Didn't know much about plants at all. But he took the plant home, he put it in soil, he watered it, fertilized it, took care of it. And nothing grew. And he waited a little while longer. Nothing grew. In fact, he was going into the office, and some people in the other cubicles had these plants growing. Some of them had little palm trees. Some of them had little banana plants. Some of them had one of those spider plants. I mean, it was amazing. All this greenery around, except for his little pot that was growing nothing. Even some nights when everyone had gone home, he'd sit there encouraging the seed to grow. giving it all kinds of positive words of encouragement to grow, and yet there was nothing. So it finally neared the end of the year, and he looked at his wife and he said, I'm not going into work today. This is embarrassing. I look around the office and everyone has something growing except for me. It's not even a contest. Why should I even go in? And his wife encouraged him much as he had encouraged the plant. And so he went into work that day with his pot without a plant. And they're all standing there in the assembly room. They all have their trees and shrubs and weeds or flowers, whatever had grown. And here he is with his pot. The CEO stands in front of him and says, today you will meet your new executive officer. Be prepared. And then he stopped. And in the back there was Chris with his little plantless pot. And he said, you, come up here in front of everybody. I want everybody to see this. And sheepishly, as much as he was ready to run out of the room, he walked to the front and he stood there amidst his fellow employees, some of them snickering to themselves, some of them holding the laugh, thinking what they might say later on. Some were trying to be encouraging and pitied him. And the CEO looked at him and said, ladies and gentlemen, this is your new boss. Well, it didn't make any sense. He was the only one without a plan. And then the CEO said to them, you see, the seeds that I gave you last year, they were sterile. They could not possibly grow anything. And the only one of you who grew nothing, the only one of you who did what he could with what he had, was this man. You see, the Lord doesn't ask us to be perfect. He doesn't ask us to be successful. What he asks is that we live with integrity, and that amidst everything that we are dealt and all we are entrusted with, that we are faithful.